Once we're done with the, I'll go to these two things. And try to get it right.
Senate will please come to order. As per the senator from Chittenden Central's request, I'm attempting to get myself here as well, closer to the time. We had recess until 4:30. My understanding is we would now be taking up H.704. H.704 was referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs after being read the first time. Senator from Chittenden Central.
I believe what we'd like to do is pick up H.887.
In that case, we will skip along. I was interpreting we were going to continue, so sorry about that, Senator. Your bill has been temporarily passed over. In that case,
Mr. President, as I said, we would immediately take up the yield. Okay.
So that's my bad, as it were.
I'm hip.
All right, so we have up for action H.887. H.887 was read for the first time and referred to the Committee on Finance, which consider the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriation. We also don't have the senator from Finance, just so you know.
Let me amend my motion. We will immediately, following 704, take up the yield bill. So I would defer to the senator from Windsor in this moment and move to her bill. Thank you.
So, as I believe I was saying when I started, we have H.704. H.704 is read for the first time for the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, which consider the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H.704, an act relating to disclosure of compensation in job advertisements.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the committee, Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to be the warm-up act for the yield bill. H.704 is a bill designed to improve pay equity for Vermonters, especially Vermont women and members of the BIPOC community. Its intent is to provide greater information on compensation during the job application process in order to address some causes of pay equity based on gender and race. This strike-all amendment you can find on page 4281. And it takes what is already considered an human resources best practice and requires Vermont employers to disclose compensation or a compensation range in job advertisements to prospective employees. 8 states have already passed very similar legislation, and 15 are actively debating its passage. Currently, women in the United States as a whole make 84% of what men make, and in Vermont, happily, they make 93% of what men do. This is actually the best ratio in the country. We should be really proud of ourselves, although we're not at 100% yet, except here in the legislature where we have noted we all are paid exactly the same amount. More on that later. This is the best ratio in the country, and we've seen it rise more in the last 10 years than in the 20 years before that. This isn't by accident. Vermont deserves significant credit for its efforts to make change. The Vermont legislature gets credit for a strong equal pay law that has been even further strengthened this legislative session, allowing employees to discuss their pay so that it's easier to see pay disparities, prohibitions against requiring salary history, we did that a few years ago, from job applicants, and good protections against sexual harassment. One of the factors in causing pay equity is how people are compensated. There is rarely outright intentional discrimination at play when people are paid differently, but bias does have an impact. This bill addresses at least 2 significant factors impacting wage differences. inequity in the negotiation process, and lack of transparency in compensation. Research shows that when job applicants are clearly informed about the context for negotiations, including the types of compensation, benefits, or conditions that are negotiable, or the typical pay for the position, gender differences in negotiation outcomes lessen, and suggests that initiatives which improve transparency are likely to help equalize opportunities at the bargaining table. When employers enter negotiations without a predetermined salary range, candidates tend to rely on their past pay as a reference point. It's common for applicants to request a salary 10 to 20% higher than their previous earnings. However, given that women and people of color typically earn less than white men in the same occupations, they would need to demand a much higher increase, a much larger increase to reach equity. Consequently, women and people of color often state lower salary requirements during negotiations, which means existing pay disparities are perpetuated. And this is what we're trying to break, to improve in this bill. Providing applicants with clear information about negotiation context significantly reduces gender disparities in negotiations. With this information, gender-based differences in negotiation diminish, leading to fairer outcomes. Including pay ranges in job postings is also beneficial for employers. There are efficiency gains. Transparency about pay ranges helps employers avoid wasting time interviewing people who would not accept the position because the pay doesn't align with their expectations. It provides better employee retention. Pay range transparency promotes employee trust and loyalty, which is good for employers' bottom line. A recent survey found that the perception of pay transparency in the workplace decreases intent to leave by 30%, indicating that pay transparency can also help retain employees. It also helps with increased qualified candidates. A study shows that 70% of organizations that list pay ranges on job postings experienced more people applying to their postings, and 66% saw an increase in the quality of job applications they saw. 65% of organizations also said sharing pay ranges on job postings makes them more competitive in attracting top talent. And there are some other business benefits. Research also shows that including pay ranges in job postings helps reduce online recruiting costs because it reduces the cost per click, total clicks per job divided by the cost to promote it. 2 academic studies suggest that pay transparency increases employee productivity if employees are aware of how their pay compares to that of their colleagues. They may be compelled to work harder, thus benefiting employers with greater productivity. Some employers may prefer not to disclose pay ranges because they want to preserve the possibility of paying a higher amount in order to attract a particular applicant. Nothing in this bill would prevent an employee from negotiating a higher pay, and it's much better practice for an employee to have a clear compensation policy that they use to set pay that does the best job of attracting and retaining the most desirable candidates. So this bill is short, and I will go through its 4 sections. Section 1 addresses disclosure of compensation to prospective employees. It requires job advertisements to include, for most jobs, the salary or wage range for the job advertised. For commission-based jobs, notice that the job is paid on commission, and that's all that's required, with no required salary or wage range. It also includes jobs that are paid on commission basis in whole and in part. For tipped jobs, notice that the job is paid on a tipped basis and the base wage or base wage range for the job. This applies to jobs physically located, and this was some discussion. We had quite a productive conversation with the businesses that, the business community that joined us in Senate Economic Development. This applies to jobs physically located in Vermont and remote jobs that perform work for an office or work location that is physically located in Vermont, and jobs that are available to internal candidates or external candidates or both. The requirements do not apply to employers with fewer than 5 employees, general hiring notices like help wanted signs, general invitations to find out more about working for an employer that are not related to a specific job, and verbal job announcements made in person, on the radio, or on a similar electronic platform like a podcast. This will be informed, this is like most, this is enforced by the Attorney General's office. Section 2 is a section we added. It is guidance for businesses and the outreach. It requires the Attorney General's office to publish guidance for employers and employees by January 1st, 2025. And the AG's office shall coordinate with the Commission on Women and other stakeholders to conduct outreach and education. So that will help, we hope, our business community comply with this. Section 3 is the effective date, which takes place on, I believe, January 1st, 2025. And the committee heard from Representative Ashley Bartley, who was the reporter of the bill, Carrie Brown, the executive director of the Vermont Commission on Women, Bill Driscoll, Vice President, Associated Industries of Vermont, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, and our own splendid Damian Leonard, Legislative Counsel, our Legislative Counsel. And the vote in committee was 3-1-1, and we ask for the Senate's support.
Thank you, Senator from Windsor. Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee of Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. Question now is, shall the bill be read the 3rd time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered 3rd reading of H.704. We have now up for action H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation. Please listen to the 2nd reading of the bill.
H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation.
H.887 went to both the Appropriations and Finance Committees. For the report on the Committee of Finance, I would turn to the Senator from Washington, Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think I don't have to ask permission to speak to the Senate Finance meeting or amendment, but since the Finance Amendment is Section 1 of the bill, I will start with that. The other body had this bill for 4 months, and the Senate Finance Committee had it for 4 days. And at 9:30 on Friday evening, we ran out of steam, and we just couldn't deal with study committees. And so we worked over the weekend by email, and we came back. And the bill, as it is in the calendar, has a commission on the future of education in Vermont in it. I guess I can say that somehow I'm feeling that the pressure that we were all feeling at the beginning of the session is kind of dissipating because budgets have gotten voted, and the pressure is peeling down. And I think where your Committee on Finance started is school spending up until maybe 5 years ago, around COVID, when COVID hit, went up 3 to 4% a year. This year, it went up 18%. It is an unprecedented number. Budgets have come down a little bit. We're gonna raise money and get it down a little bit more. It is still well above 10%. It is a high enough increase, so we are quite confident that some people, we're gonna see an increase in tax sales. We're gonna see people priced out of the apartment and housing market. And we have an affordability crisis, and we need to deal with that. It's difficult, but we have the second highest per pupil spending in the country, second only to New York, and we've told they pay their teachers a whole lot better than we do. And that was before this last increase. We could well be the highest. We have the highest, off the charts, highest adult to student ratio in our schools. We have off the charts small class sizes. And I think this year we found out that we hit the financial wall. Even if we get this down below 18, down to some, percent, some of the money that we're going to be using is one time, and we're falsely buying those rates down. We won't be able to do it next year. But we had two goals when we went into this. The first was to find out definitively, to set up a small group task force, and you'll see that in the bill, that would work with everybody. All the Vs, as I found out they're called, the school boards, the superintendents, the business managers, NCSL, anybody out there that can help us to figure out, A, what is going on in our schools, and how can we bend this spending curve? Because this is our new base. Next year, we're not going to have the money to do the buy down that we're doing this year. And next year, the prices will go up from this new very high base. And so in the first section, and in the meantime, Senate Education Committee looked at the commission language that came from the other body, and it included 23 members. I think our ed funding has gotten it down to 13. They did some language tweaks. They said that to us. We have, in our amendment, we switch out the House language for the Senate education language. And I think that was some of the confusion because the House language was posted on the website because we hadn't changed it. And then we add a study on school finance. And right now we have 4 legislators from the money committees and the education committee in each body. I'm going to, as soon as it's printed, have an amendment to our amendment to make that 6. So we have a slightly larger committee to work on that. And so we renumbered, and the Finance Study Committee is section 1, and then I think we have A, B, and C. We have the ed language as I think it's 1B, and we moved, the one change we made to that was that we moved the starting date out till July 25. We felt that we should start the financing, and how we finance our schools is the foundation that we build on. It's the money that we have to build excellence, to build a future. And so we felt we should give, and the goal of this finance committee will be to bring legislation. It's not a report. It is, we will develop legislation that can be presented next year to start us making the decisions. We've had several proposals brought up to us in the last day or two. Some of them sound really good, but we still have 2 bills to get out. We just haven't had the time to do our due diligence, to look into what would be the actual impact on our schools and on our education and on our students. So we have put this study committee as a priority. The commission starts once we've done, and once we've had one session to work through the language, then that commission can start and can build on our work. Let's see. The other thing we've done is the commission was funded with money. Senator Kitchell isn't here to correct me, but as we understand it, $200,000 was appropriated to the Department of Education to pay for the education facilities study. Okay, Senator Kitchell's here, she can correct me. There's not a definite number yet, but there seems to be agreement that there's about $150,000 left. The bill as it came to us used all that $150,000 for the commission. There's only 2 legislators. It's not a legislative committee. We're not staffing it. So we're not sure how we could use $150,000. That money is taken back and given to the general fund to fund both studies. So it's there and it's available to fund both studies. Because we probably will have to hire some help, some expertise. That is the Senate amendment that is being brought to you. The rest of our amendments that we voted out on Friday night are in the bill as presented. And so I'm going to go through that. So we have the 2 committees. We have the finance structure going first, and then we have the future building on that foundation, and we think we have a funding source. Okay. Section 2, and I should say, Santa Claus is good. I did get my Christmas tree this year. Normally the yield bill is section 2, and it consists of 2 or 3 paragraphs that set the yield. This is the bill that we have hung a lot of stuff on. The yield is set, and if you're going back and looking at last year's yield, they aren't the same. They are not a good comparable, because when we did the yield, the weighting bill, we went away from equalized students to education spending. So there's a difference in accounting and terminology. But we set the yield, the income yield, and I'd have to find the whole bill to do that. And the income yield, we are the same as the other body on that. Okay, so a couple other things that are going on. We set the yield. Then we set about trying to solve the problem of this year's tax rate and trying to find some relief for people. We only have one way to do that, and that's to raise revenue, which generally requires that you raise taxes unless you can find some revenue you can reappropriate. But I think anyone that's had any contact with the Appropriations Committee knows there hasn't been a whole lot of money to reappropriate. So we look to taxes. The other body also, they raised, and I'll go through what they did and then what we did. They initiated a cloud tax. Your Senate Finance Committee initiated a cloud tax. We did a more limited cloud tax. When we first started about doing a cloud tax, we were talking about you bought TurboTax and you plugged it into your computer versus you paid a fee to use TurboTax in the cloud. Can I say that the tech industry has gotten a lot more complex in 10, 12 years? There's computers that put things into beyond my comprehension, I think beyond most of our comprehension. And we were concerned that if we just did everything, that there could be a really heavy, we were hearing $100,000 kinds of bills to small startup tech industries in the state. And we didn't want to do that. And we were also concerned that we tried to do it as software as a service only. And we couldn't divide that out. You have to have something very clear so the tax department knows what's taxable and what's not taxable, because if there's a gray area, people frequently through no fault of their own get into trouble. And then they get very angry at us. So we have done a more limited tax and left it to the tax department to discern what they can definitely define as this is taxable. The end result is the other body raised $20 million. We are only estimating we're raising 16. The other body went to, and I should say, this was not a pleasant discussion for the committee to talk about raising taxes on anybody at this kind of still highly inflation time is not easy. And we're balancing that off of people that are looking at a 15, 16% increase in their property taxes. So we went looking, we started where the House did, which is they raised the rooms portion of the rooms and meals tax on Airbnb, short-term rentals, but only that's Airbnb section. They didn't do it on everybody else, hotels, motels, our regular B&Bs. It's defined as anyone who is not regulated by the Department of Health. All of those other short-term rental entities are classified as lodging, and they have all kinds of regulations, health and safety regulations, extra expense that they have to go to. We looked at raising portions of the sales tax. We looked at raising the entire sales tax. It would have made us the highest in New England. We looked at raising the entire rooms tax. It would have made us the highest in New England. And we heard from the wedding industry that that amount, when you're looking at $100,000 wedding, which kind of blows my mind, but makes a difference. You're shopping around, you're spending a lot of money. We found out during COVID that the wedding industry is a good size industry in Vermont, and one that brings in a lot of money. So we did listen to them. So we settled on a 3% surcharge or additional fee on the short-term rentals. Doing that, I believe we raised about 10 million. All told, we've raised 26 million. Takes around 12 million to buy down a penny in the tax rate. So we were able to buy down 2 cents. When the House was looking at this with the number of budgets they had, they thought they were at 15. They thought they had brought it down to 15. We did about the same. And then, fortunately, the economy is doing well and there's money coming in. And so we've been assured that in the budget waterfall, there will be another 25 million. So all told, we should have brought the tax rate down to about 12.5%. And depending on where budgets go, it could be a little lower. We would have liked to make it a lot lower, but we could not figure out where we could find the $200 million that it would take to get us down into the single digits. It's just, we'd have to pauperize somebody else to do that. So that we did. Paid software tangible purposes. The other thing that we didn't do, the other body tried to buy down the bump that people on income sensitivity are going to feel. When you get your property tax credit this year, it will be based on your income and your property taxes last year. So Senator McDonald, my sage, is nodding, so I know I'm right about that. But that will look at the increase you had last year, which was something like 5%, nowhere near what you're getting this year. So the other body tried to buy that down, and they did that. When they were working on this, they had a 15% increase for everybody, for those that pay on income, for homestead property, and for non-homestead property. What they did is they raised the non-homestead property up to 18% increase. Used that, I think it was 23 million, to buy down that one-time bump. So you would get this year a much increased property tax credit for this 1 year. What happens next year when you're supposed to get that bump is not spoken to. You're going to double dip and get 2 years of $1,000 increase. But we looked at that, and what we found out is in non-homestead property is all rental property, including all the low-income affordable housing that we've been building. And because it is affordable housing, they can't raise their rent to cover the 18% increase in their property taxes. And so I'm not sure where they'd get it. It would probably have to come out of any money we're giving them to build housing. And we also had some concerns that if we raise the landlord's rent, and we have almost no vacancies, and our rents have been going up astronomically over the last 5 years, we were concerned that that 18% passed on to renters would also price people out of the market. And I think one of our goals has been not to increase our homeless problem. But if housing is beyond people's means to afford, that's where they're going to end up, because we don't have an abundance of lower priced property they can move into. It's very hard to come by. So that was the decision. Let's see. Okay, there's a change in the school budget. So voters of the school district approved the school board to expend, and they've changed that to the district and higher or lower per pupil education spending. The tax commissioner has asked us to put on their tax rates are dependent on per pupil spending or determined by per pupil spending. We said, yeah, we just forgot to get it drafted. So it will come in as soon as I get it handed to me as an amendment to do that, I think. If not, it's not a big deal. We did leave in the Create Education Fund Advisory Committee that will be advising. We heard this afternoon that there's some concern about the ability of staff to do this while at the same time they're doing the letter. We had just let it ride, mostly because we're trying to do as little as possible to the other body's bill, but also it does not start until July of 25. So we have some time next year to change our mind on that one. We repealed the Act 127 suspension of the ballot language requirement and the creation of education funding. We do that. And we sunset that advisory committee in 2034. All right. They, okay, and then the next few sections are the CLA. I think we've all heard from our constituents that I voted for this tax rate, and then the stupid CLA comes in and my tax rate goes up 20 cents. And what is the matter with you and the stupid CLA? If you just get rid of it, my taxes wouldn't be half as bad. It's not the CLA. The CLA merely says, if you haven't reappraised and you're, it's not fair to tax you at the same rate as the guy in the next town who's just reappraised and he's paying on full value and you're paying on 80% of your value. It makes that adjustment. And if you ask me to do the math, I will have to have a caucus of the whole, and joint fiscal can come in with a whiteboard and demonstrate it. But what we're doing is we're going to, it still does the CLA, you still get penalized for being out of line. But we're doing the adjustment based on the statewide property adjustment CLA. The end results, after you add, subtract, multiply, and divide several times, is that you are going to see a lesser difference between the tax rate you vote and the impact that the CLA has on that. And it's in some ways smoke and mirrors. It's just what you multiply and when, and what you divide and when. But it does cut down some of that big wide swings that people get so upset about. Okay, 26, it amends the pupil weighting transition mechanism from 84 of 25 to confine with the statewide adjustment. I think this is all CLA. Okay, and then in section 18, we are putting the excess spending cap back in. It was taken out when we did Act 127 because we didn't want to penalize towns that we were giving a lot more taxing capacity to for increasing their spending, because we wanted them to increase their spending to pay for the extra services for the kids that were being weighted. We're putting that back in. I believe that the other body had it at 120% of the statewide average per pupil. Again, we've been told that we need to have more cost containment. And so we've ramped that down to 116%. So if you spend 17% more, or 16.5 more than the statewide average per pupil, you are going to get charged double, tax double on the amount of money over that 16%. We've had an excess spending threshold. The other was an allowable growth threshold. You can only grow 2% a year. We had a proposal brought to us, and I think Senator Brock will probably permit it to present it, that would have had both a allowable growth cap and the excess spending. And if you went over the allowable growth, you got hit with excess spending at a much lower level. That is still out there. Let's see what else we've done. Okay. By putting in the excess growth cap, we also removed, I think, 3 pages of exceptions to what doesn't get caught in the excess growth cap. They're just, one of us has a good reason why their town should be exempt this year, and they've gotten added on. My assumption is first thing next year, we're going to start adding them on when our schools look at these. But the decision was we're going to start with a clean slate, and we're serious about this. This is your spending. It does exempt any bonds that were voted prior to July 1st of this year. But after that, those payments will be in. Then we have the effective dates. And I believe that is it. I believe that is it. The vote in committee. I'll have to look it up. I know everybody wasn't there for every meeting. But I think
Page 4304.
4304, I'm way up. 5, one more. It was 5, no. Okay.
It doesn't seem like enough
I have,
people.
it says 501. I think it was 502 by the time we got to 9 o'clock on Friday. That I think gets us to the right number. So thank you, Mr. President.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, was considered the same, and for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are a couple of places that the appropriations considered as we reviewed the bill as it came from Committee on Finance. First was the compensation and reimbursement for the Commission on the Future of Public Education. And that was obviously their compensation and reimbursement to the members according to the standard. And it certainly exceeds the former Senator Nicker's rule of 30 meetings, but there's a lot of work to be done. And then in section B 1100, there was actually was not new money. It was money that had already been appropriated, and that was still at the Agency of Education. And so there was language to allow that funding that was unused to support the work of the commission. So the committee vote on that was 5-1-1. But I would also indicate that there is a connection here to what the Finance Committee did, and that is the inclusion of 25 million of one-time money to help buy down the tax rate. And it is not on the waterfall. You have to have in the money in order to calculate that as part of the yield. And so in the Committee of Conference on the budget, we actually moved money around, and the 25 million is in the one-time appropriations with the money that we already is there. It's not a contingent appropriation. That was one thing that we absolutely had to deal with. Once again, I will caution, 25 million, which is about 2.5 cents, is one time. So this is going to have greater pressure. This is on top, obviously, of the revenues that are new revenues that are being generated to support the level of spending that has been voted on. So I just want to make reference to the 25 million that the presenter of the bill referenced and where that money is coming from, and clarifying very clearly that is known money. It's in the Committee of Conference, and it is part of the calculation of the tax rate. So the bill came out of appropriations on a vote of 5-1-1. You want me to report the next amendment?
Well, first I need to state the question as to where we are. And then at that point, the amendments, whether in the calendar or from the floor, are to be offered by whomever stands and whomever whatnot. So the current question I would have to cite first. And the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Finance? That's the question. Anybody who'd like to offer an amendment can rise. Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you. Once again, this is kind of crosswalking with the budget. There was a position in the Agency of Education called a data analyst position. That was recognized as really important to do a lot of the analytical work ahead of us, to look at where costs, getting all the data that's necessary really to inform the work. And so that position is included in the budget, and the Committee of Conference has agreed upon it. and the funding as well. So we removed the position that was in the yield bill, in this bill, because it was already reflected in the budget and created there and funded there. So this is simply to get rid of the duplication. On the other hand, in the yield bill, there was language about the function and the purpose of that position. That's on page 4305. So the language in terms of what the position would enable the agency to do is articulated in the yield bill. We also discovered that there were a number of very small towns. They seem to be all pretty much in Essex County, except for Kirby, where there was an overpayment, and it's because of erroneous accounting. And some of them are very, very small, like 29,000. I think Leamington got 2,000. And so what we're doing is adding a section. This amendment would deal with the compensation to these towns for the overpayment. And you can see they're listed: Canaan, Bloomfield, Brunswick, New Haven, not East Haven, I'm sorry. New Haven is not in Essex County. Granby, Guildhall, Kirby, Leamington, and Maidstone. Town of Norton and the town of Victory. So you will notice that those towns are being compensated for overpayment. So the amendment deals with the duplication of the position and the overpayment of those very small towns. And this amendment is being offered by myself and Senator Perchlik. Thank you.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be amended as offered by the senators from Caledonia and Washington? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You amended the report of the Committee on Finance as offered by the senators from Caledonia and Washington. Question is, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance has two small amendments, and they were supposed to be being emailed to the Secretary's office. So I think you need to have them in writing. One was Commissioner Bolio's, just adding the wording to it, and the other was adding 2 members. They said they'd have them emailed up.
Let me just confer for 1 second as to what they have. Just gonna have the secretary check with you if there's a particular one you are looking to consider at this time. And yes, Senator from Chittenden Southeast, one of those 3 seems to have your name on it. Whether you're offering it or not is up to, seems as though maybe your chair's considerations. What order? Senator Weston, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, as I understand you're waiting, I'm happy to offer my amendment if now would be appropriate. Otherwise, I'm happy to wait.
Well, I think the other senator from Washington sort of had the floor and was determining which one they wanted to offer. And I don't know the dynamics of the circumstances, so we might just wait for a moment.
Really fine, thank you.
I want to remind folks that microphones are still on in terms of just being aware of that sometimes. Senator from Washington, are you wanting to offer an amendment, or should I defer to the other senator from Washington?
That setup had a mistake. And so we're trying to get the drafter to change that.
Might we take up a different amendment at this
We may
time?
take up a different
Senator
amendment.
from
Yes, thank you.
Washington, You are welcome to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the amendment that I am moving forward can be found on page 3416, it really actually starts on 3417.
I think it's 43.
And,
but-
the reason I'm bringing this forward is because this amendment addresses what I consider to be an error or a flaw in the weighting formula, which is to say that right now the people weighting formula benefits are they go to the resident district as opposed to the district that ultimately educates the students. And so that only makes a difference if those two things are different, right? Like if the resident or the sending district is different than the district that educates the students. So for a district that has no school, they would be sending their students, they'd be tuitioning them into other districts for education. And so that tuition that they are paying that's set by a different district, that figure is not differentiated by the type of student or the weight that the student might carry. And so as a result, the increment that remains ends up as a benefit to the sending district, even though they don't operate a school. So this, I see this as a flaw that needs to be corrected. It basically means that districts that operate schools are subsidizing districts that are not operating a school. And in a year when we are focusing on cost containment, I think it's really important that if we're going to create punishment and incentives, that we are punishing and incentivizing the right things. And so I would just direct people to the amendment that has a lot of language that excludes students that are paying tuition into a district and so as a result ends up correcting this flaw. This idea of not counting basically students' tuition out has actually already been studied. It was a part of the pupil weighting study report that happened, and actually there's also a letter from Tammy Colby in support of this idea anyway, and so this, to my knowledge, has been sufficiently checked, and so I would I hope that we would be able to move forward with this, though my understanding is that and I'm gonna steal a little bit of the other senator from, one of the other senators from Washington's thunder, say that it was not seen favorably by the Finance Committee. And so as a result, I'm bringing it up because I think it is an issue that is worthy of our attention and a hope that we will fix in the future. But with that said, I am also going to withdraw my amendment. So thank you so much.
Without objection, the senator is withdrawing their amendment. Senator from Windsor.
May I inquire of the reporter of the amendment?
Well, there is no amendment to
Well,
inquire
one,
about.
she is suggesting, we haven't voted to accept her suggestion.
It was without objection,
Oh,
actually,
without
but if you
sorry.
choose
Sorry,
to
I
object,
should have risen before I just would like to ask if she has, if we have numbers on the cost, because we are interested in cost containment. This is a
Point of
big
order.
issue. Yeah,
I
Senator
believe it
from,
has been withdrawn.
okay, so we can't even discuss. Okay, thank you.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have an amendment from several members of the Finance Committee.
Would you be able to clarify which one so that the
Okay.
secretary could hand out the proper
Finance,
amendment?
it is from Senators Cummings, Bray, Brock, and Chittenden. It's the one with the membership. And what this does, currently in the bill, there are the Secretary of Education is designated, the Commissioner of Taxes are designated, and then 2 members from the House, 1 each from the Education and Ways and Means, and 2 members from the Senate, 1 each from Ways and Means. This would add 2 more, 1 from the House, either Ways and Means Committee, and 1 from the Senate, either Finance or Education Committee, so that we just have a little larger base to make sure that we have balance of point of views in the committee, which has been a concern, and that we have a big enough group to make sure we can handle the workload. And this was approved by however many members. I believe we were all there, maybe only 6 of us were today.
Senator, there's a little bit of confusion, and I'm gonna have to have a brief recess to draw you to the rostrum to figure this out. We'll declare a brief recess.
I worked for phenomenal school. Oh, there we go.
Senator, please come to order. Just to clarify, the amendment that was being offered, which I believe in a moment Senator will draw for the moment, was actually amending the amendment that the senator is offering in the calendar on page 4307. And it's sort of impossible to do an amendment to a non-offered amendment, if that makes any sense. Therefore, I would like to recognize the senator from Washington for the purposes of withdrawing without objection the amendment that was handed out, but you should hold on to that. And instead to offer the amendment that's found on the calendar on page 4307. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Without objection, I will withdraw my amendment and then propose the amendment that I went over as part of the bill, which would create the Education Finance Committee, which finance study committee, Education Finance Study Committee. It can meet up to 15 times and will consist of the Secretary of Education or designee, Commissioner of Taxes or designee, 2 members of the House, 1 from Education, 1 from Ways and Means, 2 members of the Senate, 1 from Education, 1 from Ways and Means. We really mean this to be a task force, and it states we will work with everybody we could think of. All the V's are listed in there. It's to work cooperatively with them. Our role would be to come up with proposed legislation to enact any of the solutions that we find to this. It makes, well, it's already been done in the budget, moving the money back. And what else does it do? It creates, it puts in the Senate education wording on the Commission on Education, keeps all of that. It changes the date until July of 25 so that we can run the study committee. And these study committees will be drawing from a lot of the same staff, the same people. We're trying to avoid overload. We will run the finance. We will get through at least 1 legislative session so we know what we're doing, where we seem to be going with education financial structure. It could be a lot broader than that, but we will have an idea of what that financial base is going to look like, on which the next commission can build the quality education system that they would like. We're concerned that the quality of education is so broad that dealing with the funding will just kind of get lost in the mix. And we think we have a crisis right now in education funding, and we need to deal with that before we can start building up again. And so that is what our proposal is. I don't think there's anything else in there. But that would be the amendment that we made.
So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be further amended as offered by the Senator from Washington and others as found on page 4307 to 4316 of today's calendar? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the amendment, as I understand it, first is the amendment of the Education Committee or the Finance Committee that's in the calendar, the one on 4307. Okay. So this Education Finance Study Committee and pushing back the larger commission, I think is the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. This is a crisis, or it is certainly an inflection point. There's a lot of work to be done, and we need as many people at the table as possible. It's an all hands on deck situation where we need to make sure that we have the experts in public education at the table who are looking at it from all perspectives necessary, including and especially the finance and funding perspective. And the commission, as it was proposed by the other body, does just that. It includes people who understand the school finance system in our state and can propose changes to it. And in order to really be able to understand and propose changes to the school funding system, we need to understand and propose changes also to the delivery of education in the state of Vermont. And those can't be done in silos. They have to be done together. They are one and the same. And the commission, although it's big and slightly unwieldy, I think it's necessary at this time. Creating a study committee of legislators is not going to fix the problem right now. The last time we did that, and I'm very familiar with it because I co-chaired it, we created a study committee of legislators after we had a significant analysis done with recommendations in the analysis for how to change the school funding formula. That was when we needed legislators to figure out how to implement that and to make recommendations on the legislation for that. But right now, what we need is people at the table from broad perspectives that are going to be able to look at our education system broadly, finance, delivery, facilities, and all of the other perspectives in order to make recommendations that we can then consider for implementation, including new recommendations for our school funding system. It cannot be done by a few legislators, a brand new Secretary of Education who does not understand our school finance system, and the tax commissioner. That is absolutely the wrong people to start this conversation. We need all people at the table who have the experience and the perspective to solve this problem. So I do not think the Finance Committee amendment is the right direction to go, even with the expanded numbers that are supposedly, I guess, going to be proposed in the next amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just to be clear, this is an amendment offered by Senator Cummings and others.
Oh, excuse me.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our school spending has been high for many years. We have had many discussions in committee about why it is high. And none of these people have brought us a solution. We're dealing this year with a huge increase in school spending, and nobody has brought us a solution. The schools are out there struggling, the taxpayers are struggling. We need to work on this. We are going to be working with all the same people. They're listed in there. And anybody else that knows anything about education funding. We've had several interesting amendments brought to us, solutions. In 4 days, we don't have the time to do the analysis necessary to figure out if we should be going with the rest of the country and doing an educational opportunity payment that's been considered in the other body, if we should do more growth caps, if we should do that, if we should get more focused on consolidation and try and get our schools' class sizes, not classrooms. We're talking about grade sizes up to what a national standard says you need in order to be able to present a quality education. Many of our schools are below that. And so we need to, and they are going, I don't think any of us think that it's going to be easy. I think we know that it is going to take some very painful decisions. I chaired the committee that did the last merger bill. It will be painful to work out what we can do to get our schools so they can function and produce a quality education at a rate that your average Vermonter can afford. And we think we need a task force. We're going to be working with all these other people, and then they can go on to build on that finance. We're not leaving anyone out of this. We want to work with everyone.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education did not see the first section, but I do just want to quickly rise in support or thank the Senate Finance Committee for largely keeping our work intact. But I also want to rise in support of the chair of Senate Finance and our committee. Few people have had their hand in both pots, if you will. And the senator from Washington County has not only chaired Senate Finance for many, many years. I think her one and only break, she ended up on Senate Education. So brings an incredible history and level of expertise that I respect immensely. So again, the Senate Education Committee has not taken any formal position on Senate Finance's proposal of amendment. So we're all free agents, but I just want to rise in support of the committee's work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I reflect on the size of work group and what you can get done. And sometimes they become very difficult depending on exactly how they're constructed. And my experience is back because I ended up dealing with the problem with teacher and state employees underfunding. We had a task force, we had looked at it. Ultimately, in order to move ahead, we ended up devolving to really a very small number of people trying to hammer it out, looking at the numbers, looking at the analysis, looking at where you could negotiate. And so I think that some of this is balancing out. Everybody needs to have an opportunity to express views, to put information in, but the question really becomes what is needed in short term versus what you can have a longer term or a more robust discussion. I will tell you, before we got done, the task force did pass the legislation, but in fact, what we ended up doing was very much a smaller, very small group of people with the fiscal folk who could do the analysis in order to put together a package that made sense and dealt with the funding. So I'm struggling with, yes, we want to have all the voices, but at some point, what do you have that's nimble, that in fact can pull it together? And how do you work with something that requires a very, I think, a very nimble and a very short-term response and a longer-term kind of analysis? Because I'm really thinking that that this is something that I know that there's an idea, take more time, a more deferral, but I think, you know, when we're looking at spending, when we're looking at and raising the taxes, when we're looking at one-time money going in that won't be there, there's a financial expediency and really critical need that it seems to me that this amendment is attempting to address. And so I don't envy the work of anybody who's going to be on that committee, because it's really going to be a work committee, and it's not one where the task is simple. So I'm simply back to how to get something done and how you do it. And ultimately, it usually is a small work group that really does that analysis and then develop something that people can respond to. And I'm hoping that this is in fact what this finance committee could do. Thank you.
Question is, shall the report of committee center from Chittenden Central?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be voting no to the amendment. I believe that decoupling the financial piece of this work from the systems piece, from the structure piece, is probably not a good idea. We know why education costs a lot in the state of Vermont. We know. There is no easy fix. There is no quick fix. I've been hearing people talk about going back to foundation formulas, going back to block grants. Do you know what happens when we do that? Poor kids suffer. Black and brown kids suffer. Kids living out in the country suffer. It's not a good idea. We used to do that and we changed that. We now have a system that is probably one of the most equitable financing systems in the country, because we look at individual kids and we make a decision about what it costs to educate them, because they're not all the same and they don't all cost the same to educate. My kids were privileged white kids living in a nice neighborhood in a nice city in the state of Vermont. They didn't cost a lot to educate. That's just that's a fact. I think we need to look at the structure of as a whole. Sitting in the education committee for the last couple of years has been really frustrating, because when I want to make change, I'm told I can't. Well, you can't talk about, you know, curriculum, because the legislature doesn't touch curriculum. You can't talk about cutting costs by not sending dollars out of the state of Vermont, because that's not what we do. We have a system that's been around for 200 years. Don't touch it. I'm saying we need to touch it. That's exactly what we need to do. And we need to look at the whole thing. And it's not going to be an easy fix overnight. I get that. I also don't necessarily agree that this should just be a group of public school people. I actually say bring the private school people in, bring business people in, bring everybody in and have a conversation, a hard one that will make long-lasting change. to our system that, by the way, is a system that gets voted as the 4th best system in the country. So I'm tired of hearing that our system is completely broken. It is not. I think that's about what I want to say, and I appreciate everyone listening to me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. I also will be voting no on this amendment. I think this puts the cart before the horse. And my father always used to say, a problem clearly stated is a problem half solved. Until you have the commission's work in hand, you don't know what the problem is that you're actually trying to fund. I think for us to do a quick fix is a mistake. I think we have one of the most equitably funded systems in the country, which the senator just spoke to. And I think until we have the commission's work of looking at the system as a whole and the challenges we face. And I would remind us that we have put many of the costs we're now trying to figure out how to pay for onto the system. We gave statewide bargaining rights for healthcare. We have a 16.4% increase in healthcare costs. We have put the PCB challenges onto the schools. We have put on universal schools. We have school meals. We have put on a lot of costs to our own system, and then we complain about it. It is a bit of, it's a little challenging. So I think very much we need to have the commission first, and then we can figure out how to fund it. We have a funding formula that works well, and it has had some serious challenges that we are all aware of. And so I would encourage us to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I didn't intend to speak again, but I'm thinking about this in terms of how our system works. And I'm thinking about a school board meeting that I went to, and they were working on their budget. And they basically said, well, we could save $500,000 in this budget, but why would we want to do that? Because it has no impact on the tax rate for our residents. And so it has an impact overall in state funding and so forth. But when you're looking at an individual budget, you're seeing, what does that mean for my town? I think the difference is we're seeing, what does that look like in totality? And so I'm back to, well, if everybody's saying that $500,000 or that $1 million doesn't change my tax rate, there's I think that's what people are struggling with, is the connection with what you're voting on, because when you're voting that $500,000, you're voting, in fact, to set a tax rate that every property owner is going to pay. So I kind of have said that in the back of my mind. It had nothing to do, the outcomes with the school, small school, wonderful school. My sister taught there. But the comment was, why would we want to do anything to look at that kind of cost? Because we don't see any direct benefit relative to our to the residents of our town. To me, that's a small example of what people are talking about, is the connection between the spending decisions and ultimately the revenues that have to be raised. It's a difficult discussion, no question about it, but I do think it does influence, and in this case, it's an example of where that does influence a decision on spending. So I'm just sharing that one conversation relative to a spending decision that ultimately gets reflected in that statewide total. Thank you.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too wasn't planning on speaking again, but the senator from Caledonia's story actually, I think, illustrates the point of why we need to make sure that we have a broad group of people at the table, because those kinds of conversations are happening at our school board meetings all across the state. And depending on where you are and what kind of school board and what kind of community you live in and where they fall within the spectrum of our school funding system, you're going to have a different perspective. And that's why having a broad group of people at the table that's representing School Boards Association and the school board perspective, that's representing the teachers' perspective, that's representing the superintendents and the business managers and all the other and representing people in our communities is going to have a better perspective of the types of challenges that we need to solve and how that is connected to the finance decisions that are made at the local level and then seen up at the state level. So it's, I think, a perfect example of why starting with a small group first is not the right answer, but starting with a broad group and then breaking it down to the people who are going to need to be in the room with the analysts and need to be running the numbers after they come up with a broad vision for education in the state. Thank you.
Senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a little confused by this amendment. Not confused as to what it does, but I'm just confused as to why this is the best path forward, or suggested to be the best path forward. As has been discussed, as we've heard, having a small, nimble group it has been suggested as a good idea, but I have to disagree with that. I mean, we're talking about one of the largest systems that spans across the entire state, affects thousands of students, affects thousands of parents, teachers, and staff. We should not be having a small group looking at this issue. And another thing that I wanted to note, I was looking at the amendment and I could not find it in there, and I'm happy to stand corrected, but another important component of this is the public engagement that we discussed for the commission that is now being delayed or proposed to be delayed by a year. In the public engagement section, we discuss, or there is a provision that requires reaching out to all of the counties and having meetings in these different counties, because what works in Bennington County may not work in Chittenden County or Wyndham County. And so it's necessary and actually essential to have that public engagement across the state. So I do not understand why it's necessary to decouple the finance piece from all the other important components of this. So I will be voting no on this amendment, and I encourage others to do that as well.
Senior Senator from Bennington.
Mr. President, I'll be brief. Nobody represents the taxpayers other than us. And for that reason, I support the amendment, because we need taxpayer input into this debate. People are very worried about keeping their homes that they've lived in for years. They're very worried about the affordability of Vermont's education system. And hopefully this group of legislators will keep that first, and we can continue the conversation with all the stakeholders that will be at the table. But it is, after all, us as representatives of the people who are determining and representing those taxpayers.
Question is, Senator from Franklin.
Thanks, Mr. President. Vermont taxpayer is bleeding to the point that some are going to lose their homes because they aren't going to be able to pay the taxes, and there's no relief in sight. Forming a commission to study everything from the year one forward in infinitesimal detail and with 1 million people as folks that you talk to is a great idea. Patient's going to be dead before that happens. And even if you look at this finance report and finance commission or group as a group that produces an interim result, but our focus and our urgency right now needs to be focused on how do we stop the bleeding right now, not 2 years from now or longer, with an ideal, perfect solution. The results of the Education Finance Committee, which is designed to create a plan this year so that it can present it to the next legislative session, which is not that far away, is critical. I don't want to be back here, the voters will, a year from now, talking about the same thing, that we've got a double or triple digit increase in property taxes and we've done nothing about it except talk. We need to stop the bleeding now. This is the first step for doing that. Mr. President.
Question is, shall the report of Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Washington and others as found on page 4307?
Roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Senator from Bennington has requested that. Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Washington and others as found on page 4307 of today's calendar? Are you ready for the question? If so, Secretary shall commence to call the roll. Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Brew,
Yes.
Senator Bray,
Yes.
Senator Brock,
Yes.
Senator Campion,
Yes.
Senator Chittenden,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
No.
Senator Collmore,
Yes.
Senator Cummings,
Yes.
Senator Bueller,
No.
Senator Hardy,
No.
Senator Harrison,
No.
Senator Hashim,
No.
Senator Ingalls,
Yes.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Senator Lyons,
No.
Senator McDonald,
Yes.
Senator McCormack,
Yes.
Senator Norris,
Yes.
Senator Pershlet,
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale,
Yes.
Senator Sears, yes, Senator Starr,
Yes.
Senator Bihowski,
No.
Senator Watson,
No.
Senator Weeks,
Yes.
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator White,
No.
Senator Williams,
Yes.
Senator Renner,
No.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 19, those voting nay, 10, and you have further amended the report of the Committee on Finance as offered by the Senator from Washington and others as found on page 4307. Senator from Washington.
Yes, Mr. President. I would like to move to further amend the
Report of the Committee on Finance.
yes, report of the Committee on Finance. And this, I believe, the amendment has been passed out. This will do what I had mentioned, which is to add one more member, one from the House, either the Education or Ways and Means Committee, and one from the Senate, either Education or Means Committee. There's hope that we would have a large enough group to carry the weight of doing the substantial burden we're taking on.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance be further amended as offered by the Senator from Washington and others as handed out? Don't actually have a document number on this, but I believe the Secretary knows which one we're talking about. It is on your desk. It was the one that was handed out earlier, a single page, about 2/3 of a page. It was the one that was handed out just before the last debate. Are you ready for the question, Senator from Chittenden Central?
May I inquire of the presenter of the amendment?
The Senator from Washington is interrogated as the presenter of the amendment.
I do have to admit that I seem to have misplaced my copy, so I apologize. Thank you. I am wondering if the way this is constructed, it could happen that there are only members of Ways and Means Committees and no member of the Education Committee, and I'm trying to figure this out right now. Or does it require a member of the Education
It
Committee?
requires a member of the Education Committee in the House and a member of the Education Committee in the Senate. And then there's one from Ways and Means and one from Finance. And then either body can name a third one that could go either way.
But it would have to come from those two committees. It couldn't draw from the larger body that might include educators or other people.
Yes, we, both bodies have done some pretty extensive work. The House has done some very extensive work this year. Hasn't gotten anything all pulled together. So we're trying to keep one very focused group going forward, working with everybody else that's out there. We're envisioning a very collaborative process. I'd like one big table to bring back proposed legislation. which then will go through the legislative process. So it will go to other committees, it will go to caucus, it'll go to the floor, and it will be public.
I thank the senators.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by a senator from Washington and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have further amended the report of the Committee on Finance as amended as offered by the senator from Washington and others as handed out. Current question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance as amended? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Central.
I have an amendment or two.
Do you have one that you would like us to do at
Yes,
this
we
time?
can start with one.
Can you indicate which one?
Sure, the one that talks about sending money out of the state.
Does it have a number in the top or top left?
There's too much paper on my desk.
Sure.
Is that the one?
Hang on. Oh, yes, that is the one. Awesome.
Thank
All
you.
right, so there has been a lot of talk about cost containment, a lot. Those are the words that I hear multiple times a day. So I have a couple amendments that will address cost containment. And these amendments are not necessarily friendly ones, but they are amendments nonetheless. So the first one that you are looking at hopefully right now has to do with tuition for approved independent schools that are, or schools that are outside of the borders of Vermont. So if you want to go ahead and read along with me. A school, hopefully we all have the same one. A school district shall not pay the tuition of a student except to a public school, an approved independent school eligible to receive public tuition located in Vermont, an independent school meeting education quality standards, a tutorial program approved by the state board, an approved education program, or an independent school in another state located within 25 miles of the Vermont border and approved under the laws of the state that complies with the reporting requirement under subsection 4010C of this title, nor shall payment of tuition on behalf of a person be denied on account of age. Unless otherwise provided, a person who is aggrieved by a decision of a school board relating to eligibility for tuition payments, the amount of tuition payable, or the school the person may attend may appeal to the state board, and its decision shall be final. An independent school in another state located within 25 miles of the Vermont border that is approved under the laws of that state is eligible to receive public tuition if the following conditions are met. The independent school has adopted and implemented policies and procedures to comply with all anti-discrimination laws applicable to public schools in the state where the independent school is located, and makes reasonable efforts to enforce those policies and procedures, even if those laws by their terms do not apply to the independent school. The school shall attest to compliance with this subdivision on or before August 1st of each year. The independent school posts and maintains on its website in a prominent place its policy to comply with all anti-discrimination laws that apply to public schools in the state where the independent school is located. The school shall attest to compliance with this subdivision on or before August 1st of each year. The independent school provides an assurance on or before August 1st of each year, signed by the head of school, that no public funds were used to subsidize the tuition of private payer students. So we're looking for cost containment. I've said before that I think part of our budget crisis has to do with the fact that this is death by 1,000 cuts. It's a lot of little things that have added up, and some big things that have added up over time. This will make a small dent in containing costs in the state of Vermont. And it's something that we looked at in our education committee a while ago. And I thought I would bring it to the body to have a look and a vote in the interest of containing costs for our taxpayers here in the state of Vermont. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment, the senator from Chittenden Central, I think, brought us another amendment last night, but they didn't bring this amendment. It definitely is in the purview of the Education Committee, so I would cede to the Chair of Education if he would like to speak to the wisdom.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have looked at this issue over the past several years. My hesitation is I wouldn't want to do this at this moment, and I don't want to pass over the yield bill. So I would guess perhaps the best thing to do would be to ask the senator if there's going to be a third reading, can it be considered during third reading? I'm looking to the, I guess, Senator the pro tem, if there's going to be a third reading tomorrow, perhaps the Senate Education Committee could look at this and have some testimony.
It sounds like the senator from Bennington would like to interrogate the senator from Chittenden Central if they would so choose. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. The intention is to go through all stages of passage tonight. If the senator needs a short recess with Ledge Council, we can certainly accommodate in that way, but we have delayed this bill far too long.
Understood. Yeah. Why don't we take a brief recess? And the Committee of Education can meet with the Chair of Finance in the corner as well. Thank you.
We will take a brief recess till follow the gavel.
tomorrow.
Senate, please come to order. Senate, please come to order. Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee met and decided to find this unfavorable at this time at a vote 3-2. There are a lot of outstanding questions, including some that were brought to me by senators who live on the Quebec border that students go over. Certain students are required to go over for special education services and other services. So at this point, the committee does not find it favorable. Thank you.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Central? Another senator from Chittenden Central.
May I inquire of the presenter of the amendment?
Senator who presented the amendment is interrogated.
Is there data about how much taxpayer dollar is going to other states and countries?
There is, it obviously changes, it fluctuates. It's right now not as high, I believe it's not as high as it once was, but I think it was somewhere in the realm of $20–25 million. So as I said, it's not a large amount, but it is something. And we keep talking about cost containment, so that's what I'm trying to offer.
I thank the senator. I frankly think $25 million is a significant amount of money for Vermont taxpayers to be subsidizing schools that are not even in the state or the country, especially when we are speaking about concern over the quality of education being offered here and the cost. It seems incomprehensible to me that we would allow taxpayer money to flow so freely out of the state and country. So thank you for the amendment.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just say that it's a complicated issue. We do know that there are a lot of students that do use these funds for special education services for other reasons. We also have agreements with other states, New Hampshire and New York, around using their schools. I know down in Massachusetts, for example, some of those schools are the closest schools to the Vermont border. So it is a complicated issue. And again, I have concerns. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to remind people in last year's budget, we put a moratorium on any additional independent schools. So I think, not that I just wanted to remind people that there was concern about the addition of schools, the nature of the schools. And so it's hard to remember everything we did, but we did last year have the moratorium on addition of adding more independent schools eligible for tuition. And as I can't speak to, but I do know that along the Connecticut River border, particularly, we have a lot of very rural towns that don't operate, or they have partnerships with New Hampshire schools, including, I guess a big one would be Hanover High School, but that's further south. But up in the Essex County, there are a lot of non-operating districts simply because of the population. But in any case, I just wanted to remind everyone of the action that we did take last year on the moratorium of independent schools.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the senator from Chittenden Central for offering this amendment. And in fact, I believe that we have passed something very similar or identical to this on the Senate floor. In fact, I believe it was 2 sessions ago that we passed almost this identical language that was supportive of this. The 25-mile radius was included in order to accommodate some of those interstate partnerships we have with usually public schools on the other side of the border. So public schools in New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, and I think we might even have an agreement with a school in Canada. Those are often or generally public schools. To the extent that they are private schools, the 25-mile radius is meant to accommodate those areas of the state where there are only a few kids that need to go across the border if in fact it is in an independent school. The moratorium that we put on independent schools last year was for the approval of additional independent schools to make them approved independent schools eligible to receive tuition. There already are a number of out of state and out of the country schools that have been approved to receive our tuition benefit, and 25 million, I would agree with the senator, the other senator from Chittenden Central, is a significant amount of money that our school districts could use and or that our taxpayers could save. I have in my district very few tuition districts, school districts or towns, but I do have a couple in my district. And I was recently speaking to a school board member in one of the towns that is a full tuition district that sends all of their kids outside of their town. They don't operate a school, a non-operating district. And they said before, when we were an operating district and we had a school in our town, we used to welcome people into our town. We were excited to see families move to our town because they had kids that were going to go to our school. And now what's happening is families, wealthy families or families who want to get free tuition for their kids are moving to the town or taking up residence in their second residence in their ski house or whatever it is, their second home in this town in order to benefit from Vermont's tuition program that allows them to then send their kids out of state to a private school or an academy in Massachusetts or New Hampshire or Sweden or Switzerland. So we have people who are moving into towns in order to take advantage of this for 4 years and then moving away. So they are not contributing to our towns. They are simply taking advantage of this loophole in our law. And this would be a tax saving initiative for people in these towns and for our education fund statewide. This is not a fly by the seat of your pants proposal. This was literally passed by the Senate 2 years ago. It is well documented, well researched, and I urge the body to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, following up on those comments from the Senator from Addison, I was on the Education Committee, I think in the 21-22 session, we passed something very similar because there was a concern about exactly what the Senator from Addison talked about, people sending their children to schools in Sweden, for example. I thought we already did this. So I don't know if we did it and then it was temporary or we only talked about it and it didn't pass, but I thought we had done something very similar, but maybe we passed the Senate, but it didn't pass the House. And I just don't remember that part of it. But we had I don't know how, if we had 25 miles, but we had a border. We didn't prevent it from being out of the country because of Quebec. And then we also had a provision for therapeutic schools or special education. Like if the family could make an appeal to say that they're the only school for their kid happened to be in Massachusetts to meet their special needs, that was allowed. So I guess I'm forgetting that it didn't pass. So just from different people nodding or shaking their heads, I think I got the answer to my question. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Senator from Essex, Orleans, excuse me.
Yeah, from all three, I guess. But anyway, the Or country is the part that really stuck out to me. You know, we take care of the New Hampshire border, the Mass border, the New York border, but up a mile from the border in Orleans County, in the upper part of Essex County, that sends occasionally a child or two north of the border because it's real close. Now they'll be prohibited from doing that. And I just think that it's wrong and so I'll be not supporting this.
I just want to say,
I didn't call on anybody yet. Sorry. Senator from Washington behind you.
Mr. President,
Actually.
as it's been pointed out this evening, I've been here a long time. And one thing I've learned and one thing that finance did this year is that these are very complex issues. And I, over time, have developed a principle. I don't vote for bills that are proposed on the floor and have not been through the committee of jurisdiction, because I have never known us to do an adequate job that way. We had several proposals brought to finance on this bill that we just didn't have. Some of them sounded really good and they were cost containment bills, but we did not have time to figure out who's going to win, who's going to lose, to do all that balancing. If we do this, some kids are going to see a major disruption. Some school districts may see a major disruption. That's why we are based on a committee process. We don't have the time that the House does. We have to trust that the committees of jurisdiction, if they're doing their jobs, have listened to both sides of an issue and have reached the best decision they can. And when we start redoing all the committee decisions on the floor, or we start doing new things that committees haven't had a chance to work on, we usually don't get them right.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I remembered my other question, and may I make an inquiry of the presenter of the amendment?
The presenter of the amendment is interrogated.
Is it my understanding that the intent is here that they could attend a school outside of the state if it was a public school?
Yes, within 25 miles.
Okay, because the way I read it is if the 25-mile limit only applied to independent schools, but maybe since that's all one long sentence, since I'm not following the grammar of the comments, but it seems to me that it says, you know, public school, then all the requirements are about independent schools and not about public schools. But my understanding is the intent is to have both for public and independent be within 25 miles of the border.
That is correct.
Okay, I think the reporter of amendment. I'm sympathetic to this amendment. I think in different circumstances, I would vote for it. Like we said, we voted it for before, but I am agreeing with the senator from Washington about trying to do it in this format. Thank you.
Question, Senator from Chittenden Central.
I'd like to thank everyone for their comments to start with, Mr. President. Also, I want to make a correction. Apparently, my number of 25 million was vastly overstated, and I apologize. It would be, we only have 300 kids right now that are going out of state. So it'd be more like 5 to 6 million. So my apologies. But as I said, death by 1,000 cuts. This is a cost containment measure. And to the point that this is hard, it is hard. And I think containing costs is going to be hard. I hear what people are saying. And I thank my colleague from Bennington who brought up special education. I have a sheet here from the AOE that says, you know, we spend $500 million on special education every year. Minus federal funds, it's a little under $500 million. And some of that goes out of state. So, you know, I hope that the group that's working on education funding is also looking at helping our kids in the state, because when we send them out of state, we're talking of millions of dollars for extreme needs. We looked at that in our committee this year. Just wanted to bring that up as well. Thank you.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you. May I inquire of the reporter of the amendment?
Senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated as a reporter.
Mr. President, I'm curious if she would welcome a friendly amendment to her amendment, including all the things we've already voted on. Improving it, going both to public schools, to independent schools, to another state or country located 25 miles from the Vermont border, and including therapeutic schools, because we do send tuition for our blind students. In particular, we just really don't have very good special education in this state yet for our blind students. And now that we've closed the Austin School, we need to send our, many of our deaf students have to go out of state as well. So I would be curious if she would be willing to entertain a friendly amendment to her amendment, bringing it into par with what we've already voted on, therefore it not being a new issue or a new request of this body, something we've already voted on. And so that's my question for the reporter.
To be honest, I am not prepared to take on an amendment to my amendment at this time.
Thank you.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Central? Roll call has been requested by the Senator from Bennington. Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll. Hello. The Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Brew.
No.
Senator Bray.
No.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
No.
Senator Chittenden. Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
No.
Senator Hewley.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingle.
No.
Senator Kitchell.
No.
Senator Lyons.
No.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator McCormick.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershing.
No.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
No.
Senator Sears. No. No.
Senator, unfortunately, according to our rules,
The answer is no.
thank you.
Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Uhosky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Weston.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
No.
I apologize, we have different numbers. Please list the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 11, those voting nay, 18, and you have failed to further amend the report of the Committee on Finance as amended. The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Finance? Senator from Chittenden Central.
I have one last amendment. Hopefully it will go faster than the first one. This amendment is also a cost-containing amendment, a cost-containing measure, and it has to do with something that I experience in my district, which is that we have a private Catholic school that we all love, but it charges the publicly tuitioned kids $16,000 a year. And it charges the privately tuitioned kids $8,000 a year. So double the publicly tuition kid than the privately tuition kid. So again, if we're serious about containing costs, it seems like this is a bill, or sorry, an amendment that we should give a close look to and give consideration to. I will point to specifically starting on the bottom of page 2, if you're there. It's got a couple relevant provisions. 9, an approved independent school that intends to accept public tuition shall be approved by the state board as eligible to receive public tuition only on the condition that the school complies with the following requirements. Provided, however, that this subdivision 9 shall not apply to an independent school that limits enrollment to students who are on an individualized education program or a plan under section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, 29 USC subsection 794, and who are enrolled pursuant to a written agreement between the local education agency and the school. A, the tuitions, the school's tuition rate for publicly tuition students shall be the same or lower than the tuition rate for private payer students, and both tuition rates shall be published on the school's website and reported annually to the Agency of Education. B, publicly tuition students shall not be charged an application fee, an academic fee, or any other fees for academic materials. And C, the school posts on its website an assurance signed by the head of school that no public funds were used to subsidize the tuition of private payer students. I know, I get the sense that there are folks in here who are hesitant to make decisions on the fly. This is something that we looked at in our education committee. The House looked at it as well. It's been with us now for 2 years in our committee. And again, I just thought, since we're talking about cost containment and we seem really committed to that idea, it would be something that we should consider at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Central as indicated on the handout that you've just received? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm looking to the Center of Finance. I don't know if this came to your committee or no. Okay. Could we have a brief recess?
We'll have a recess, so we'll follow the gavel.
Thank you. Because our average cost.
Yes, but don't we have a lower?
Senator, please come to order. Senator from
Thank you, Mr.
Bennington.
President. The Committee of Education met, we found this amendment unfavorable on a vote of 4-1. It's much more complex than the prior amendment, could impact a lot of small schools throughout the state, particularly perhaps tuitioning small districts in rural areas. So at this point, the committee again finds it unfavorable out of a vote of 4-1 and asks the Senate to vote no. Thank you, Mr. President. When the vote is taken, I'd like it taken by roll.
Roll call has been requested by the Senator from Bennington. Question, Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, very uncomfortable hearing numbers being thrown around. Last ones would have made a heck of a difference on a vote, not knowing, and without a committee process and bringing in testimony and coming in very, very uncomfortable taking a vote, trying to pass legislation on the floor when we don't know, we can't be sure to what numbers might be. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. In a year when our public education system is indeed bleeding, I find it incredibly problematic that we would again be using taxpayer money to pay more to private schools than they are charging their privately tuition students. So I will be supporting this amendment, and I thank the senator for bringing it forward.
Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Finance as amended be further amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Central? Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Brew.
No.
Senator Bray.
No.
Senator Brock. Senator Campion.
No.
Senator Chittenden.
No.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
No.
Senator Yulee.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
No.
Senator Hashim.
No.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchen.
No.
Senator Lyons.
No.
Senator McDonald.
No.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Norris.
No.
Senator Pershwood.
No.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
No.
Senator Sears. No. Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Rehowski.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
No.
Senator Westman.
No.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
No.
Senator Renner.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Please list the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 8, those voting nay, 21, and you have failed to further amend the report of the Committee on Finance as amended with further proposal amendment. Are you ready? The question now is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Finance as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Finance as amended. Question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Aye.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And you're ordered third reading of H.887. Senator from Chittenden Central.
At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take this bill through all remaining stages of passage.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to place H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to place H.887 through all remaining stages of passage. H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation, has had third reading ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed H.887. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank senators for that long but extremely important debate. I would like to move through a few more bills. And so first, I would like to, and we're now getting into the notice calendar. So my first motion would be that we take S310, pending notice on the action calendar, up for immediate action.
Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules where it take up and act relating to natural disasters, government response, recovery, and resiliency, pending extension of the notice on for the consideration. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have moved to take up S310 for immediate consideration. I need to bill. So the standing question is, shall the Senate concur with House Proposal Amendment on S310? I'd like to recognize Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. As senators might recall, this was one of our major flood bills that left the Senate. This is the one on emergency response and government response to natural disasters that included a lot of provisions about emergency management. The House did return the bill to us with a number of really good additions and one not favorable addition. So I will walk you through a couple of, the changes. There was created in the Senate version, Community Resilience and Disaster Mitigation Fund that would provide grants to municipalities. You might recall that this fund was in part, hopefully to be funded by future funds from our, I can't remember the Make Big Oil Pay. I can't remember the real name for it, but that fund. There was also some funding that might come to us later in the super fund. Thank you, Senator. There might be some funding that comes to us later in ARPA. Regenerations funds. Sorry, I'm forgetting all my words. I'm tired. But so the House just added a report back annually on how those funds are used. So that seemed pretty cool to us. The second part would add two new sections. One is giving the treasurer some codifying some activities of the treasurer regarding financing and credit facilities. That is a provision that the treasurer used last year to fund some additional emergency housing. So that this House put this in as a section to allow the treasurer to use this this power, this authority during natural disasters to allow funding for climate resiliency and response to natural disasters in recovery. They also, you might recall, we had included public works employees as first responders and provided them with a survivor benefit if they were killed in the line of duty in responding to an all hazards event. This is actually something that happened during Hurricane Irene, when two public works employees in Rutland were killed responding to the flooding in Rutland. Unfortunately, the House took out the survivor benefits for public works employees, but added survivor benefits for law enforcement and correctional officers. And we did not see that favorably, in large part because the fund for survivor benefits is a very small fund. It now only has about $160,000 in it. There has been a claim, or will be soon, for, unfortunately, the death of a firefighter, I believe. So that would, if that's approved, take the fund down to $80,000, adding all of the correctional officers and all law enforcement across the state would expand the use of the fund to the extent that the fund would not be able to carry the weight of all of that in the event that there were, unfortunately, tragic events that led to deaths in the line of duty. It also seemed to be getting away from the point of the bill, or the focus of the bill, which was on natural disaster response, and our correctional officers don't do that, and a law enforcement responds to many things beyond the scope of natural disasters. So our amendment from Senate Government Operations would remove the death benefits or survivor benefits that were included in the House. It would not put back the survivor benefits that were in the bill as it passed out of the Senate. It would just revert to current law, which is that these survivor benefits are for firefighters and emergency EMS responders. And so it would go back to current law. House did add some language about planning for emergency community-based food and charitable food providers in the event of an emergency of a natural disaster, that the food folks are in the loop so we can provide food and shelter to people in that event of an emergency, and asks for a report back from the Department of Children and Families about the possibility of implementing for emergency purposes the restaurant meals program through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is a program that was similar to the emergency Everyone Eats program that happened during COVID, and then the emergency Everyone Eats program that happened last year during the flood. And having this program sort of in the wings, it would be helpful for the emergency response next time. It's just a report back. It does not include any money. It does not implement anything. It just asks for them for some information. It does amend and clarify some of the emergency powers of the governor regarding gifts, grants, and loans acceptance during a state of emergency and a response to an all hazards event. The House committee worked with the governor's office to clarify the language, and we thought it was fine. I also, for everybody's comfort and my comfort, checked in with the chair of appropriations, and she's okay with the language as well. And so, and the other thing that didn't make it into this summary, I'm sorry, is that you might recall a debate on the floor about 911 and the 911 reporting of data and the requirement about notifying people in the event of an emergency. The House did part of that, and I checked in with the senator from Chittenden South Central, I think, no, Southeast, the one who's not here, and just to confirm, what the House did was what Finance was comfortable with, and I'm just looking over at the chair, is they said that the reporting of data, but not the notification of an emergency part of it. So my recollection was that was what finance was also comfortable with, and the House was comfortable with that as well, so they did include that in the bill. So the amendment of further proposal of amendment that all the members of your Senate Government Operations Committee are putting forth is to just take out the portion of the additional survivors benefits for law enforcement and correctional officer. We would like to get this done quickly so that this bill can make it through this session, because it includes so many important things for our emergency response to natural disasters. And we want to make sure it makes it to the finish line. So with that, Mr. President, the full members of the committee would love the support of the full Senate on this. Thank you.
Senator from Madison moves that the Senate not concur with further proposal of amendment as found on the handout. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate has concurred with further proposal of amendment as offered by the Senator from Addison and others. Senator from Chittenden.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to return to H.121, which we did second read of earlier today, and move that through all stages of passage.
Senator from Chittenden Central moves that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H.121 and place it through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? H.121 by reference is an act relating to enhancing consumer privacy. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by Senator from Windsor.
Sorry, I wasn't clear that we were going to do the rest of H.121 today. I thought that we were
That
doing
may
this
be.
tomorrow. Data privacy, this is the data privacy bill. There was going to be much work done on it, I thought. And so I'm just curious that we're proceeding this way.
So there is a question. You are welcome to interrogate the senator or anybody if you'd like. You've stated a question to the universe. I cannot answer that question.
I'm curious, and I either ask the pro tem or the chair of economic development.
You can choose which one you'd like to interrogate, and I'd be happy to recognize them for you.
Perhaps I will ask my chair what we are doing.
The senator from Chittenden Southeast is interrogated if she so chooses as the reporter of the bill.
Much appreciated, Mr. President. I hope people can appreciate that in the late stages of the session, any opportunity to move something more quickly so the other body has time to consider it and consider their action is both a courtesy to them as well as helps ensure that something doesn't simply die by calendar. I will be presenting an amendment that incorporates the kids code language that I mentioned before that my seatmate was just going through to see the healthcare related changes that she had requested, as well as some additional language proposed by the senator from Washington, Senator Watson. So that will all be in an amendment that will be handed out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. That answers my question.
I'm glad the universe spoke. The question is, shall the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H.121 and place through all remaining stages of passage? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended rules in order to take up H.121 and place it through all remaining stages of passage. With that, third reading was ordered on H.121, an act relating to enhancing consumer privacy. Are there any amendments before third reading?
Oh, yeah.
Now would be the time. Senator
Yes.
from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that should be being handed out. I just want to put my pages back together. I have given, I think, folks a summary of what is in this amendment. I will try not to go line by line. I'll just go page by page to point things out as quickly as I can, so that everyone may consider things that have come from other committees and wanted consideration. On page 1, the omission of abortion is the It is what you don't see, and that abortion has been deleted since it exists elsewhere in statute, and we don't need to redefine it here. That was a change from your Senate Health and Welfare Committee. On page 3, consumer is modified so that it is clear a consumer is an adult, because we look at differently at statute for children, and so that's further defined in the kids code to be minor consumers. Page 7, healthcare component and hybrid entity are definitions that are added that become important in instances of amendment people passed earlier today, the body passed earlier today, but now the definitions are harmonized there. The next change is at the bottom of page 10. Senator Watson, the senator from Washington, came forward with some interesting and valuable ideas to consider. And the change is that the sale of personal data at the bottom of page 10.
We don't have it.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. This is section 47A. It's the definition of the sale of personal data now includes that it has value, it has monetary or other valuable consideration, comma, including for political gain. So just recognizing that manipulation of data and mining people's data can also be used for high value in the political process as well. Similarly, there is now still in the definition section, 2 pages later, the sensitive data includes information that would reveal a consumer's racial or ethnic origin, national origin, et cetera. And the addition is or political affiliation. The senator from Washington's final change is toward the bottom of that same page. There is another part of the data sensitive definition that includes pregnancy, and there is the addition of or menstrual cycle. This section about sensitive data deletes children being a known child from sensitive data, because that's addressed in the kids code, where we prohibit most actions that are otherwise allowed under data privacy as they relate to children. If you flip the page and you get out of the definition section, the first section is duties of controllers to minors. This is everything that data privacy will control related to minor consumers, but actually I should say not consumers, because they're not consuming. They're not consenting to an exchange or a sale. Minors are just minors. And so minors are residents of Vermont, and this is the duties of data privacy's controllers provisions to minors that you wouldn't find in the kids code. So they have essentially the same rights as consumers who are considered adults. They may exercise these rights, or a parent or legal guardian may exercise these rights. The controller should still comply with a request by a minor or their parent or guardian to do the same things in terms of deletion or changes to their data. They should not discriminate or retaliate against a minor and deny them something that they would otherwise be eligible for. Really importantly, at the bottom of that page, a controller shall not process the personal data of a known minor for the purposes of targeted advertising. This is different than data privacy in that known minors are to be left alone and not profiled for consumption purposes. If you turn the page, you then get into the kids code. And as kids code has gone through different bodies and been harmonized again with data privacy, there are just a few definitional changes. I'll just point them out quickly. Affiliate, age estimation, age verification, business associate, some of these are just harmonization, some are for the HIPAA pieces. Consumer, covered business, so that it doesn't conflict on the next page with covered entity, which has a HIPAA definition. And all of the HIPAA related definitions, and especially a definition of, these are in alphabetical order, so it might be easy to find, gender affirming health data, which is definition 16. Many of these are for new provisions that protect children from any geofencing when they are accessing a healthcare facility, and we further spell out other types of facilities. And there is a new definition of geofencing in the kids code. That's item 17. Healthcare facility and mental health facility and minor consumer are the new definitions on page 21. We had previously defined online service, product, or feature as what it's not. Now we define it as what it is. Processor was not previously in the kids code, but to harmonize with data privacy, we wanted to define processor as well as publicly available information on the next page. The last definitional changes are the 29, 30, and 31, reproductive or sexual health care, reproductive or sexual health data, and reproductive or sexual health facility. All of these relate to prohibiting geofencing. If you go a few pages onward, you have a section 2449D, covered business obligations. And this harmonizes with data privacy to ensure that businesses provide privacy information in terms of service policies and community standards concisely and prominently. And further down, covered business prohibitions. We added language that says a covered business that is reasonably likely to be accessed and subject to this subchapter, just to make it clear that we are talking about the covered businesses that target children or are likely to be accessed by children. Close to the end, maybe the third to last page, subsection 11 is the actual language about geofencing as a prohibited action. And this time it's about healthcare facilities, but all the other facilities that were previously defined. You have enforcement power, and you have the effective dates have not been impacted. So that is a walkthrough of the amendment that hopefully addresses some of the other concerns that were raised today. Thank you. Oh, my committee has not had the opportunity to review this before others. So if they would like to speak to that or take a recess, I would leave that up to them. Obviously, things are moving quickly in the last hours of the session. So I would beg people's patience. But maybe I will just ask for a recess so they have time to process a little bit. If that's okay.
We'll declare a brief recess till call the gavel.
Article where they asked me.
Well, yeah. Senate will please come to order. The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an extremely gracious committee that has looked through all the language and asked a number of questions and has voted 5-0 in favor of this amendment. I don't think there was anything else I was going to say about the amendment. Happy to take questions, and we ask for the body's support.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
Mr. President, may I inquire the Chair of Health and Welfare?
The senator from the other senator, one of the other senators from Chittenden Southeast is interrogated if they so choose.
Thank you. Mr. President, I know earlier on the floor work, there was discussion about sorting out different strategies, language, et cetera, between the two committees that had some shared jurisdiction and mutual interest. I don't know, has your committee reviewed the proposal of amendment before us? And if so, do you have a committee position or vote?
So, Mr. President, that's a very good question. My committee has not looked at this except as it's been distributed on the floor. But I will say that the content that is here in this proposal amendment is exactly what we voted on in our committee to include. As you recall, this morning, section 1 was completely struck from our proposal. And within section 1 were some very important pieces, including the hybrid entity for healthcare data. Remember, a hybrid entity being protected only for the HIPAA protected data, and then other data for the other part of the entity is not protected. That is now in this bill. That is very important to our healthcare providers and to others in the state, and particularly important for consumers. And as well, the other sections the other pieces of section 1 are here. What's been removed is what we took off from the floor. The biometric data changes that we had made in our committee, it's gone. And that shall not be spoken aloud is also gone, the PRA. And but there is instead a section on Title IX, Chapter 63, 2453, protections offered by the Attorney General that is in this, as I just looked at it. So the things that we did, the work, and we did work hard in our committee, and I'm actually happy that you asked the question so that I could commend the committee, my committee, for its work on this data protection stuff, in particular on the HIPAA language and protections that are offered. So I will be voting for this proposal. And I think as my committee looks through the proposal, the committee will see all of the things that we held dear when we passed the bill, our amendment out of committee, with just a couple things missing. And we understand the vote this morning and accept that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for that report.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I inquire of the Chair of Health and Welfare?
Again, the Senator from Chittenden Southeast, as the Chair of Health and Welfare, is interrogated if they choose.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I am looking at the bill to try to determine if everything is in there, and I'm looking at the exclusions on, we do not have page numbers, but it's on 2449B, exclusions. And it does not appear to incorporate the whole hybrid concept. I see that hybrid entity is listed as part of the definitions, but I it doesn't look to me, unless I'm looking in the wrong place, which is entirely possible, but it doesn't look like it incorporates our work on that sort of narrow exclusion of a hybrid entity that, so that they are covered for their HIPAA work, but not covered for their, or they're excluded for their HIPAA covered work, but not for their non-HIPAA covered work.
Well, Mr. President, could we take a brief recess, please?
We'll declare a recess till the fall of the gavel.
Yep.
Samuel, please come to order.
So we'll keep going.
I've been in that tool.
Current question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you amended the bill as offered by the Senator from Chittenden Southeast. Are there any other amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H.121, an act relating to enhancing consumer privacy.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H.121. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that we move immediately to H.55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments pending entry on the action calendar.
Fair enough. The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate take up for immediate consideration, suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H.55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments. And just for reference, that bill is pending entry onto the notice calendar because it was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which has since voted that back out. But it is technically not on the notice calendar. It is pending entry to the notice calendar. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you suspend your rules in order to take up for immediate consideration H.55. H.55 was read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, where it was considered and it was voted out favorably with proposal of amendment. The bill was then referred to Committee on Finance, which considered the same and recommends that when further amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to Committee on Appropriations, which I'm supposing voted it out favorably. With that, please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H.55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report from the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no idea what page this is on in the calendar, so.
It was on page
Sorry, I
4320.
forgot to look it up.
That's okay. 4323 is where it had appeared on the notice calendar.
Thank you. As passed out of Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs, this bill marries 6 bills, and I understand I've gotten yet another spouse through Senate Finance, so it's really kind of wild and maybe doesn't belong in this state. But anyway, this marries 6 bills which are related to labor and employment issues, and it creates but does not fund the baby bond trust. One bill, many issues. H.55 provides relief for employers with unemployment insurance experience rating after natural disasters. It protects recipients of unemployment insurance who are not at fault in causing an overpayment of UI benefits, and it adds additional penalties for deliberate UI fraud. It makes technical corrections in the unemployment insurance and workers' compensation statutes, and it provides workers' compensation coverage for some state employees recovering from PTSD. It continues our work collecting data on Vermont firefighters, their cancer rates, and it subsidizes the cost of early detection cancer screenings for our firefighters, all of them. And it makes technical corrections to Vermont's parental and paid and family leave law to make it consistent with federal law. And it sets up the baby bond trust in statute, unfunded. It's a lot in one bill, and I will go through this very quickly by subject at a high level. So first, Section 1 provides relief for employers from unemployment insurance charges after a natural disaster. Right now, we waive 4 weeks of employer experience charges. the impact of this summer's flooding on business and employers with a natural disaster which closed their businesses all out of their control, made it clear we needed to increase the number of weeks that employers are protected from having their experience rating increased. As a result, we changed this from 4 to 10 weeks for employers who've experienced a natural disaster. Second, sections 2 through 5 address unemployment insurance overpayments. In these sections, we waive overpayments of unemployment insurance benefits when recovering those overpayments would be against equity and good conscience, federal law, and the overpayment was not the claimant's fault. We've added additional penalties for deliberate fraud, which allows Vermont Department of Labor to hold serious fraudsters to account. And I would just note here that both Vermont Department of Labor and Vermont Legal Aid agreed to the compromises in these sections 2, 3, and 4, and they began discussions about possible waiver provisions prior to the pandemic, and so this just further supported the compromises that they made together that are contained here in 55. So I want to make clear that these sections actually represent a lot of compromise and a lot of good work. Sections 6 through 10 are UI technical corrections, and section 11 is the workers' compensation technical correction. Section 12 provides workers' compensation coverage for state employees recovering from PTSD. We already provide this coverage for law enforcement, EMS, and firefighters. This extends it to a few key state employees. And I think we will be addressing aspects of this next year. The fiscal impact on this year is almost nothing, but may conceivably grow in the future. And we need to keep our eyes on that. Sections 13 and 14 address our am I there? Yes. Address our firefighters. Following up, as you may recall from last year's work, sections 13, 14 ask for 2 reports on firefighter cancers in Vermont. The first report is from the Division of Fire Safety, which is going to collect data, again, from all our firefighters, volunteers, and professionals on cancers and cancer rates on and about our Vermont firefighters. And so that'll be terrific because we don't actually fully have that. And the second is from the Department of Financial Regulation on the number of firefighter cancer claims in Vermont. Section 15 creates a program to subsidize our firefighter cancer screenings in Vermont. This was a $1 million pilot that we are financing, which to screen all eligible firefighters. And we are hoping that this will save lives, identify cancers at an early stage, driving down medical costs and saving lives. The vote, section 16, how could I forget? Section 16 and 17. Vermont's parent and family leave. These are technical changes which sync us up with the federal law, and we had to change definitions in order to stay current with federal law. It makes us consistent with federal law. Sections 18 and 19 are the baby bonds. Section 18 sets this in statute and really will depend on their being able to raise money to support this. As some of you may recall, baby bonds are what are being hoped for in the future as a mechanism, not unlike the earlier plan that had been to establish a 529 plan for everybody, every child in Vermont. This is really trying to break the cycle of poverty. It's a very ambitious and optimistic plan that our treasurer has been promoting to every child who is born with certain financial needs, and that's what they're going to continue to work on, have a sum of money that will grow over time and that will enable them in education and in their employment and It is, I think, a great idea. We don't have the money to start it this year. It sets it in the trust in statute, and it requires in section 19, a report from the treasurer on various aspects of how to actually implement it in the future. And then I have to go back to our vote. I believe our vote was 5-0-0. Yeah, thank you, 5-0-0. And we heard from 14 people, all the obvious players, everyone from Dirk Anderson at the Department of Labor to our divine Damian Leonard. So if you are interested in the 14, I would just like to also note that I took this bill, I brought this bill, even though it wasn't sent to Senate Government Operations. We discussed the list of state employees, and I think we're fine with this, but we are very interested in the future in discussing what groups are included in what benefits and having a consistent way of addressing that, which has been inconsistent during the course of this year, which is frustrating us a little bit. But I think we're fine with this. It includes a range of mental health workers and people who work everywhere from the veterans home to dispatch to psychiatric facilities. And so we are fine with this for this year, but I think we're going to want to look at this next year. So it is with that. Oh, Mr. President, how you've changed. With that, I am saying thank you and sitting down.
Thank you very much, Senator from Windsor. Always a pleasure. H.55 went to finance as well. For that report, I would look to the senator from Chittenden Southeast, Senator Ram Hinsdale.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank my vice chair for a very capable report on short notice, as well as thank my ranking member for his graciousness in suspending rules so we can take this bill up and get it over to the other body. The jurisdiction of Senate Finance in this bill is the unemployment insurance rates, because that is essentially an insurance program that's paid for by businesses and nonprofits that have employees and isn't an expenditure of the state. So I'll try not to go into UI experience rating. This just means that we're giving grace to those businesses or entities impacted by a natural disaster, and it doesn't affect their experience rating, which essentially means the overall UI trust fund is paying for that grace. But we feel, and so does the Department of Labor, that it's a very fair use, of the UI trust fund based on an act of God, and that was confirmed in Senate Finance. Finally, Senate Finance had another bill on its wall, H10, that related to the Vermont Employment Growth Incentive. The House passed it over with a 1-year extension. We constantly give this 1 to 3 year extensions. It's an existing incentive that helps businesses pay more to new workers than they would have otherwise paid and increase their payroll and increase their competitiveness, or to make a large capital expense. And the money for this is then measured by its additional, the additional tax benefit accrued to the state. And that is essentially how the program continues to function, is ensuring that what we invest is more than returned to the state in additional tax value. We amended the bill so that we would extend VEGI for another 2 years until January 1st of 2027. And the effective dates have changed accordingly. And the vote out of our committee, Mr. President, was 7-0-0.
Thank you, Senator from Chittenden Southeast. For the report on the committee from appropriations, I would look to the senator from Washington, Senator Perchlik.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee on appropriation reviewed the bill for expenditures. There was a few. There's the cancer screening that was mentioned for firefighters. We accounted for that. I think it was $1 million in the budget, the big bill. There might be some impacts on some of the workers' comp, but we don't know exactly what those are going to be. And it's going to be in outer years. Then we also looked at the veggie expansion. That's a tax expenditure. So those of us that hope to be around here next year working on the budget didn't want to be setting ourselves up for starting behind the starting line as we get going next year. But we found out that the forecasters just assumed we were going to extend veggie, so they included it in their forecast. So we recommend, we voted 601 to recommend that it be passed with the amendment of finance and with the report intact.
Thank you, Senator. To return to the finance amendment, which is available on page 43, 42. The question is, shall the bill be amended as proposed by the Committee on Finance? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the bill as proposed by the Committee on Finance. Question now is, shall the report of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs be adopted as amended? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to explicitly thank the Chair of Appropriations who notified the Government Operations Committee about the addition of employees to the list for the workers' compensation added benefit. As the reporter of the bill mentioned, there is a sort of inconsistency in the types of employee classes that are getting added to certain benefits. We saw that with S310. So I think that we really need to look at consistency across state government on who gets what benefits. And I hope that whoever is on government operations next year will take that issue up. I also just want to note that the baby bonds bill is a bill that is on the Senate Government Operations Committee's wall. And I didn't know until right now that it was included in this bill. It's late in the session and I know things get thrown into bills, but it's pretty frustrating that committees are not respecting each other's jurisdictions and checking in with each other about bills, particularly when there's a bill on another committee's wall. So I'm not going to hold up the bill at this point, but I just wanted to express my frustration and disappointment that there was not respect for committee jurisdiction with this bill. Thank you.
A point well taken, Senator. With that said, the question is, shall the report from the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs be adopted as amended? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs Committee as amended. Question now is, shall the bill be read the third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered third reading. Senator from Windsor, I believe, wanted to offer a motion to take this through all remaining stages of passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would make the motion that we've put H.55 in all remaining stages of passage.
The Senator from Windsor has ordered that H.55 rules be suspended in order to move H.55 through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you have ordered H.55 through all remaining stages of passage.
With that ordering of that all remaining stages of passage, H.55 has been ordered to be read a third time. Are there any amendments for third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H.55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H.5. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are approaching rapidly our hard stop at 8, but I believe we have time to do H.585. That is an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs. So I would move that our rules be suspended in order to bring H.585 up for immediate action.
Now the senator from Chittenden Central moves that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for immediate consideration from the notice calendar H.585. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have voted to suspend your rules, take up for immediate consideration on the notice calendar H.585. H.585 was read for the first time, was referred to the Committee on Government Operations, which considered the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which then also recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H.585, an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Government Operations, Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President. You can find H.585 in today's calendar on page 43, 44. H.585 is, as the title says, amending the system for the pension system for sheriffs and certain sheriff deputies. You might recall, for those of us who were here a few years ago, we did a huge overhaul of our pension system. I know that there were a couple members of the body and my predecessor who were hugely involved with that, as well as a certain staff member who I see hiding behind a big screen over there. At that time, I believe they created Group G in our pension system, and Group G was specifically created for employees that may need to retire at an earlier age. Often for employees who have very stressful jobs and frankly have lower life expectancies and therefore need to and want to retire earlier. It was offered to our correctional employees a couple of years ago with a one-time chance to move from Group F, which is another group in our retirement pension system that has a longer term, a later retirement date, and they could elect to move from Group F to Group G one time for correctional officers a couple of years ago. And Group G has the benefit of an earlier retirement date, but people have to make a higher contribution to their pension system in order to be able to retire soon. So it's sort of a trade-off. Some people, about a third of correctional officers, chose that trade-off to be able to retire earlier and have higher payments to their pension system. So over the last number of years, there's been a group of people who have been working on trying to find a solution specifically for sheriff deputies, because what sheriff's departments around the state were seeing is that sheriffs deputies were joining a sheriff's department, getting trained. The sheriff's department was putting the money and the time into training the deputies, but because they didn't have a good access to a good pension system, they were leaving and becoming state troopers or municipal police officers after the sheriff's departments trained them, because they could get a better pension system through being a state trooper. State troopers, I believe, are in Group C, which allows them to retire earlier because troopers have an early retirement age that's required early retirement age. And then municipal police officers are in the VEMR's program that's more generous. So point being is that sheriff's departments were losing their deputies. And so a group of people, including, I believe, the senator from Memorial, worked on this issue in order to try to find a solution. And when Group G was created, there was a push to see if we could include sheriffs and certain sheriff deputies in that group G and give them the same opportunity for a one-time transfer into group G, just like we did with correctional officers. There seems to be a theme here with employees who do these things. So that's why we want to look at it more next year. But so H.585 does just that. And if you look at the bill in section 1, H.585 begins by modifying the definition of eligible members for Group G retirement system so that all sheriffs and certain eligible sheriff deputies are given the irrevocable option to join Group G retirement system. They can do it once and then they can't change their mind. They may also choose to stay in their current retirement group, and sheriffs and eligible deputy sheriffs who take office are hired after January 1st, 25. So after next January, all the new people will be placed in Group G. So Group G will be the option for everybody, the only option for everybody after next January. But for now, the current people can make a one-time choice. Section 1 continues by setting the normal retirement date for sheriffs and sheriff deputies in the Group G system. And for those who were first included as members in the retirement system before June 30th, 2008, is the earlier of 62 years of age and following completion of 5 years of credible service, completion of 30 years of credible service, or 55 years of age and following completion of 20 years of credible service. Normal retirement for those hired after June 30th, 2008, but before January 1, 25 is the earlier of 65 years of age following completion of 5 years of service, or 87 points reflecting a combination of the age of the member and the number of years of service, or 55 years of age following completion of 20 years of credible service. And finally, normal retirement for those hired after January 1st, 25 is attainment of 55 years of age and following completion of 20 years of credible service, or 65 years of age and following completion of 5 years of credible service. So section 2 simply adds sheriffs and eligible sheriff deputies to the calculation of the normal and early retirement allowance for Group G. Those allowances are the same as other current Group G members receive. Section 3 ensures that these sheriffs and deputy sheriffs are not now in Group G, are not named as Group F members in another statute. Section 4 creates the one-time irrevocable election in session law for sheriffs and certain eligible sheriff deputies to join Group G. Only sheriffs and deputy sheriffs that have a current level 2 or level 3 law enforcement officer certification from the Vermont Criminal Justice Council have the option of doing this one-time transfer to Group G. So they have to have their certification is 2 or 3 in order to do this one-time transfer. It also gives the Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs the authority to establish a list of positions newly eligible for Group G membership, as well as the authority to classify new deputy sheriff positions as either Group C or Group G. Section 5 makes clear that the legislative intent for reducing the compensation for sheriffs without, so now this is a new type of section. So that's the section on the retirement. So it does this one-time irrevocable Group G as a benefit for sheriffs and sheriff deputies. Section 5 and section 6 of the bill are different but related topic. As the bill came over to us, it included section 5 that as it came over to us from the other body, it included language regarding the payment for sheriffs who had their law enforcement certification revoked. And what it said was that if your law enforcement certification was revoked, then your salary would be reduced by 30%. And what your Government Operations Committee did was try to work within an existing statute that has been on statute for at least 10 years I'm sorry, I am trying to find the right copy of H.55 It's been a really long day. So that works from an existing statute. Now, I still don't have it. Here we go. Hopefully this is it. Too much paper on my desk. This is still not it. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I was not expecting to do this, so I'm a little unprepared. I
Do you
apologize.
need a
to
copy
the
as
body.
passed the
I know
House?
you're all tired.
Do you want the as passed House or do you want
I
the
want the
amendment?
as passed by the Senate Government Operations Committee. So I found it in the calendar.
43.
It is on page 4351.
There you go.
So we worked with existing statutes that there's been an existing statute on the books that says that if a sheriff does not have a level 3 law enforcement certification, their salary is 90% of the full salary. For those of you who are not familiar, there's a level 1, level 2, and level 3 certification. Level 1 is in statute. It's not often on the street, but it's in statute. Level 3 is the highest level. It's what you need to do all the full job of being a law enforcement officer, including supervising other law enforcement officers. On the books already was if you didn't have a level 3, you got 90% of your salary. So we just went with that and said if you have a level 2 but not a level 3, you get 90%. If you have a level 1 but not a level 2, you get 80%. And if you have no law enforcement certification, you get 70%. Whether it's you've never earned it or you've had it revoked, it's 70%. And we included intent language that I'll just read. It is the intent of the General Assembly that a sheriff's compensation shall correlate with the sheriff's level of law enforcement officer certification to properly reflect a sheriff's capability to perform the various duties required to effectively and efficiently manage a law enforcement agency that is the office of the sheriff. So that we felt was consistent not only with current law, but also consistent with what the job of the sheriff is in leading their department. Section 7 is just ask for a report from the state's attorneys, the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, to ask for a similar information about state's attorneys if they don't have a law license. What should their salary level be? Is there a similar reduction that should be given for state's attorneys who don't have a law license? Because if you don't have a law license, you can't practice in a court of law, you can't oversee other attorneys, you can't counsel clients. And so we wanted to see if we could get some more information about a similar kind of step system for state's attorneys. So that the bill takes effect on July 1st, 2024. We heard from a bunch of witnesses, including our amazing legislative council attorneys, Tim Devlin and Rick Sagel, from the Office of the State Treasurer, the Director of Vermont Retirement Systems, from the VSEA, from the Vice Chair of the Vermont Sheriff's Association, from the Reporter in the House, from the Director of Labor Relations and Operations Manager from the Department of State's Attorneys, and from the Chief Superior Judge of the Vermont Judiciary. The vote in committee, I believe, was 5-1-0. And we ask for your support of this fairly sloppy floor report. Thank you, everyone.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Finance for the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's a great floor report. So I'll be quick. The U.S. Senate Finance Committee did review this and found that the bill was heard testimony that the bill is not expected to have a significant impact on the state's obligations to the Vermont State Employees Retirement System. And additionally, it was stated that 585 would have no expected impact to the state's other post-employment benefits, otherwise known as OPEB liabilities. Your Senate Finance Committee voted 7-0-0 in favor of moving the bill as amended by the Senate Committee on Government Operations. Thank you, Mr. President.
So the question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the committee on, oh yeah, right. Then it went to the Committee on Appropriations. My apologies. That's not in the notice calendar yet. For the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Caledonia.
Mr. President, no apologies. In order to move this bill expeditiously, the Appropriations Committee asked not to have the bill referred officially to the committee. However, we did take testimony, and for several of us on the committee, this is an issue that we have been dealing with for a number of years and are very happy that we've been able to come up with a with the creation of this new group, a way of dealing with this disparity in retirement benefits, which has really been a real problem with recruiting and retaining when you can move to a same job, just in a different sheriff's office in a different county and have a better benefit. So we did not officially have the bill, nor did we vote, but we do support the bill and are very happy that we've been able to finally bring resolution to what has been a longstanding issue. Thank you.
My apology for apologizing. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question?
Mr. President,
Senator from Lamoille.
I'd like to thank the Government Operations Committee for working on it. A number of us have worked a very long time on this. It will level the playing field within law enforcement and not allow poaching between departments. And we see that as very important. And thank you very much.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Senator from Franklin.
Mr. President, it should come as no surprise, I rise in strong support of this bill. It's a long-awaited, much-needed, and much-appreciated bill to the women and men who work within the public safety realm of the Sheriff's Office throughout the state of Vermont. So I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Government Operations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have adopted the report of the Committee on Government Operations. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed ordered third reading of H.585, excuse me. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the heels of that, I would ask that H.585 be moved through all remaining stages of passage via suspension of our rules.
Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspends rules in order to place H.585 through all remaining stages of passage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have placed H.585 through all remaining stages of passage. Third reading of H.585 was recently ordered. And with that, 585 is an act relating to amending the pension systems for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs. Are there any amendments for third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H.585, an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed H.585. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I just wanted to thank senators for a very long day of work.
And fire.
One moment, unless that's a point of order. Thank you. There's an old
I believe the minority leader has a question for me.
Well, let me just check on it. That completes yours today. Senator from where you're from. Windsor. I was going to say Woodstock, but that would be too.
It is its own thing. I was going to inquire of the pro tem. I thought we were going to message our actions to the House on several bills. Sorry.
That would be such a great idea, which is why we are ready to do that.
And sorry, I guess I had forgotten that we did that in announcement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First,
That's why.
there was another motion.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Pending announcements.
Right, so if you could now make the
Yes.
motion that was made before I banged us out of the order of the day, which included the announcement request. That would be great.
Yes. So I would move that we message to the House our actions taken on a series of bills. And I believe we have to suspend our rules to do that. So that would be S-191, an act relating to New American Educational Grant Opportunities. S-213, an act relating to the regulation of wetlands. H.55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments. H.121, an act relating to enhancing consumer privacy. H.585, an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs. H.862, an act relating to approval of amendments to the charter of the town of Barry. H.869, an act relating to approval of the merger of the Brandon Fire District. H.872, an act relating to miscellaneous updates to the powers of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. And H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields. And S.310, and I can't read.
I got it for you.
Okay. And I believe that is the list, Mr. President.
Right now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message your actions to the House forthwith on the following bills. S-191, S-213, S-310, which is an act relating to natural disaster government response, recovery, and resiliency, H-55, H-121, H.585, H.862, H.869, H.872, and H.887. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to message your actions taken on S-191, an act relating to New American Educational Grant Opportunities, S-213, an act relating to the regulation of wetlands, river corridor development, and dam safety, S-310, an act relating to natural disaster government response, recovery, and resiliency, H-55, an act relating to miscellaneous unemployment insurance amendments, H-121, an act relating to enhancing consumer privacy, H.585, an act relating to amending the pension system for sheriffs and certain deputy sheriffs, H.862, an act relating to approval of amendments to the charter of the town of Barry, H.869, an act relating to approval of merger of Brandon Fire District number 1 and number 2, which is a clear distinction that was not indicated earlier. H.872, an act relating to miscellaneous updates to the powers of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council and the duties of law enforcement officers, and H.887, an act relating to homestead property tax yields, non-homestead rates, and policy changes to education, finance, and taxation. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Are there any announcements? Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion pending entry on the calendar for notice. I move the rules be suspended and that H.626, an act relating to animal welfare, be referred to the Committee on Appropriations.
Now, the senator from one moment. Senator from Chittenden, I don't know what I'm talking about. The senator from Caledonia moves that Senate suspend its rules in order to refer H.626 to the Committee on Appropriations. H.626 is currently pending entry on the notice calendar. Per Rule 31, because otherwise it would go tomorrow, but that would just take a little more time. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to move H.626 to the Committee on Appropriations under Rule 31A, pending entry on the notice calendar. Are there any other announcements? Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 9 tomorrow. I think we just have a charter change to get out unless something else came down. And we have some of us have a committee of conference at 9:30.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, I learned from a senator that someone was out with a collywobble, and I had to say, what are collywobbles? I'm not sure I know what collywobbles are, but collywobbles notwithstanding, tomorrow morning, Senate Natural Resources and Energy will be hosting Senate Economic Development at 9 a.m. to hear the work of the House on H.687, the Act 250/housing bill.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since everybody but Senator Chittenden has been stolen from my committee, I guess we won't meet until noon.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Welfare will meet at 9 o'clock, and it's important to be there right on the dot of 9. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Institutions Committee, Conference Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate now stand adjournment until Wednesday. Is that right? Thursday? Thursday, the 9th at 10 a.m. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjournment until Thursday, May 9th at 10 a.m.